on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals, creeping things, and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God, and Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Well, the situation is not difficult to understand, is it? There's probably very few places in Scripture where it's more plain when there is only a few words are used. I mean, these are very few words, but they very well describe the situation of the earth, doesn't it? I don't know how many words are here, but it's very straightforward. Verse 5, the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. You can't misunderstand that. You can't reinterpret it to mean something else, because it's clear, isn't it? That is just as clear as it can be. It is as clear as some of my parents' instructions to me. But I still didn't always obey. It was clear, but I still didn't always obey. Now, this is not a command, it's a statement. And the statement is that man was so wicked that every thought of every man was evil all the time. There's just not any other way that we can really describe it any differently than to look at it from that perspective, that every thought of every man was evil all the time. He mentions the plans, and he mentions, I think the English Standard says intentions, plots. That idea would be the thoughts, every thought of man. But on the flip side of that, there is this description of this man named Noah that we really know nothing about. But we find this description to also be very clear. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I'll blot out man whom I've created from the face of the land, the man, animals, creeping things, birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I've made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. So here's the setting. It's very clear, isn't it? Man has become evil. There's this description in these first few verses about the Nephilim and the marrying the sons of men and the daughters of God. There's that description, but the context seems to be the moving steadily into more evil on the earth. And so you have this setting that is very clear. And God's looking down on that, and what's his perception and what is his feeling when he looks down on the earth? He is grieved, and the conclusion is the only conclusion that's really necessary, and that is, Mari says, there has to be a cleansing. Anything else you see here in the text that would describe what God sees and how God feels?
Well, God's looking for a bride. That's what he's coming for. That's why he made us. He's pretty disappointed when he sees his bride.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Now, at this point, we're looking at a people to whom God has let his plan be known by speaking directly with the heads of households and those that would be the leaders in the family. And this would be like when he spoke to Abraham, and here he's speaking to Noah, And there are those who are hearing the instruction of God, and as Randy says, God wants these people to be His people, but He can't accept them in this sinful state that they're in. So He has to cleanse it all and start anew, start fresh. Mm-hmm.
He lived during this period of time when, and he was taken by God, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Wait for the flood to take him away.
Right.
God took him beforehand. He said, Jude 14, Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these saying. Of course, it applies now as well as, you know, during Noah's day.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine him prophesying in those days saying, behold, the Lord comes with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment upon all and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him.
That's a lot of ungodly.
A lot of ungodliness.
Yeah.
Here God's putting ungodly all over, you know.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of people he's are.
Yes. Yeah, good observation, Randy, from Jude. There is this observation from Enoch's interaction with these evil people, and God's message is very clear, that He won't accept this kind of ungodliness. He won't accept this rebellion. Again, I'm convinced that not just because of this prophecy by Enoch, but by things that we don't even know. I'm just convinced that because of the way God has acted in the past, He didn't act hastily, that He sent warning after warning. I mean, all you have to do is watch how He dealt with the Israelite people and the Israelite nation once He chose Abraham. How patient was He with Abraham? I mean, He didn't just choose Abraham, and Abraham got all unfaithful and questioning Him, and well, I'm done with you, Zap, and we'll start over, find me another one. He didn't destroy the nation of Israel the first time they sinned. Here you are at Mount Sinai. Moses is on Mount Sinai 40 days, and here he comes down off the mountain, and they're already worshiping a false god. God gets mad enough, He could wipe them out. As a matter of fact, He wants to do that. He said, I can start over with you, Moses. But He didn't, because of His patience and His steadfast love for His people and His desire to have those people want relationship with Him. So here you have a people who are rebellious, they're ungodly, and I'm convinced that God didn't just look down and say, oh, they're evil, we'll just wipe them out and start fresh. I think He had given them warning, opportunity to change. There was enough, I think, message from God to let them know that they were on the wrong path. I think that
Not only the carpenter, he built the ark, but he was also a preacher.
mm-hmm.
Because he talked to people and tried to teach them, tell them, look, you need to repent, you need to, you know, and they didn't listen.
All right. Exactly.
That was God and His wisdom telling the people, hey, you've got a chance here. But they didn't take it.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. I appreciate you bringing that up, because for the time that Noah is building this ark, the thing that he's doing is giving the people opportunity to repent. That God is. Noah's preaching, Noah's warning, and how would you like to preach for 100 years and nobody change? I mean, that'd be a pretty tough place to be.
No one preaches righteousness.
Yes, no one does. Yes. So this whole description of Noah is in contrast with the people that is described here in the beginning of chapter 6 of Genesis. Evil, ungodly, continually. They seem to be just getting worse and worse, almost like this downward spiral where they never seem to grasp the severity of what's going on. They never come to an understanding of God's warning or God's love or God's grace or anything so that they change. They just continually spiral worse and worse, so that God is sorry, He is grieved, His heart is broken when He sees the state of His creation. Randy called them His bride. We talk about most of that connection being we as the New Testament church being His bride, but yes, He wanted His people, the nation of Israel, to be that pure bride. I guess Hosea is the perfect Old Testament illustration of how he looked at his people as being his bride from that perspective. So Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Verse 5, the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, but verse 8, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. So there's God's view. There's what God sees. God looks down on the earth and He sees the wickedness and He sees the ungodliness and He sees the rebellion of mankind and how they have rejected His warning, rejected His word, rejected their place with Him. Yet on the opposite side of that is this man named Noah. He is one who is described in verse 9. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. Okay, we understand pretty much what a righteous man is. We pretty much understand when somebody says that man would be a blameless man. Interesting phrase there when it says, but Noah found favor or grace, depending on your translation, in the eyes of the Lord. What significance does that sentence make, blameless, righteous, and finding grace or favor in the eyes of the Lord? How significant is that statement about Noah? Okay, it tells us about Noah that Noah was one who was trying to do the right thing in a world that was corrupt. That's significant. Let me tell you, so that's significant when you stand out in the whole world. We're not just talking about standing out, in your family. You may be the only one trying to do right in your family. But that's a small segment. Here we're talking about the whole world because God looked down on His creation. He looked down and saw that every thought, every imagination, every concoction, everything was evil all the time, but Noah was blameless, righteous, found favor. Yes, sir? Yeah, there's that contrast. No? Yeah. Yeah, we have no clue as to what his sins might have been, but we know because he was a human being, he wasn't perfect. And when he finally gets off that big boat, he's going to show us that he's not perfect. Yeah, Tommy, you had something?
Whatever your family name may be,
right.
It may not be good. The reference to Noah being righteous and being good man, I think clarifies that the rest of the world, the entire rest of the world, was not. And that's shored up by Noah and his family were the only people spared when the time came to be spared. So this reference to everyone thought evil all the time is clarified by saying, but for. No.
Yeah, I think that little three-letter word, B-U-T, ought to be about that big. It's like, here's the rest of the world, but look at Noah. There's one more place in Scripture where I think it ought to be that big, and that's in Ephesians 2. You were lost, you were without God, you were without hope, you were separated from God, you were alienated, you're over here, and then there's that little three-letter word, but God. And it describes salvation through Christ. That's Ephesians 2. So I think there it ought to be, this big. So here the same way. It's like, here's the world. Stinks. Horrible. Awful. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord.
Look at Old Testament history. If God had not personally come down and intervened, several times it talks about God coming down.
Mm-hmm.
Coming down to intervene with mankind. Tower of Babel, Noah, Abraham. He called Abraham out of idolatry. There's a passage he says Sarah and
right.
Abraham had idols. It's like God personally had to visibly, you see the visibility of Jesus over and over again in the Old Testament. From the way I understand it, as an angelic being, as a messenger.
Exactly.
God,
yeah.
Noah, Samson. You got all the different led judges, they personally called and to try to keep God's people, from doing like the rest of the world, and the whole world being so corrupt, Christ couldn't come. And yet, once He's come, 2,000 years ago, we don't have to have that anymore. God didn't have to, because He already personally came in the flesh Himself. It has changed the world to the point that now we've got this.
Exactly.
We've got God Himself right here. And so, God, of course, He's more book, but I'm saying,
yeah.
The Hebrews 4:12 talks about the Word of God is quick and powerful, alive and powerful. That's the word Logos. Word of God, the word's called Logos there. Same as Jesus called Logos. It's like this is, when we read this, it's like reading Jesus. It's like we're reading God.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just powerful.
Because Hebrews even begins by saying that in the past He spoke in different ways, and one of those was to present Himself bodily, and sometimes not bodily, sometimes just audibly, but He presented Himself in many different ways to all of those characters that Randy's mentioned, and all of those events through the Old Testament where God would intervene and He would be present. And oftentimes He would send a messenger. Oftentimes He would send someone to speak His word. Sometimes Jesus Christ Himself would be that messenger. Sometimes it was God Himself. God's on the mountain. He's dealing with Moses all through this difficult journey of the children of Israel finally getting to the Promised Land. But yeah, in this situation, God intervenes, and it is quite dramatic. And that word doesn't even suffice, does it? Because we're talking about a flood that wiped out the world. It's not even, I guess there's not even a word in the English language that would suffice for the perfect description of that. So God reveals His will for man to be obedient, but they've not. He reveals His solution, which is what? Destruction. Look down further, beginning in verse 11. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. Now, see, He's just repeating what's already been said. We already know how violent they are. We already know how corrupt they are, how far away from God they are, how rebellious they are, how sinful they are. So now He just reminds us of that. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight. The earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all the flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. We've already been told that back in 5 and following. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all the flesh. Again, we already read this in 5 and following, but this is the story of his interaction now with Noah himself. Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Now this is God's interaction with this one with whom He found favor. I have determined to make an end to all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Okay, let's stop right there. That's the end of verse 13. I don't know if there's any significance or not, but it really emphasizes it to me that in these first 13 verses, 3 times the condition of the world is described. You see that? He describes it 3 different times. He described it in the beginning, verses 5 and following. Then he described it again, the condition of the world. And then he describes it again when he turns to talk to Noah, the condition of the world. I don't know, just tell me what you think. Is that really as significant as I think it is? That God is emphasizing just how putrid it really is? Is that what he's trying to do? Tommy?
We do a lot of custody work. The young lady working for me has decided that she wanted to do appointed work for the juvenile court to appoint lawyers for the children and the parents. And I told her, because I'd done that work a long time ago, that you're going to see a different side of society than you've been seeing. Because anybody that's got a few $1,000, they have a few $1,000s and some support to go with it. But the folks that are in juvenile court, they don't have probably any money, but worse than that, they have very little support. Well, this week, she has come to terms like I did. When I first started working, I literally went by my mother and dad's house on 5 separate occasions, months apart, and thanked them for being my parents. So, if the world is completely corrupt, there was no good to teach anybody anything other than just that. That's why God had it. Just wipe out the kids too, because it's too late.
Yeah.
When it came in Israel,
Yep, we're going to start over. I agree. I think that he's emphasizing the severity of the depth to which the world has sunk. I mean, if he just said it one time, that's enough. He didn't have to say it 2 more times. He didn't have to give us that. But there is no doubt when you get down to his conversation with Noah that at that point, God's decision has been made. So God reveals his plan to Noah, and he says, because here's the totality of it. And this is what the English Standard says. All flesh has corrupted their way. I mean, that's what he said back up there. Every thought of every man is evil all the time. Now, as he's communicating this to Noah, he says to Noah, all flesh has corrupted their way. All the earth was filled with violence. So there you have it. So God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Significance there, I think, that I'm going to destroy them with what I've created, and significance of that we'll get to more in a minute. And then he goes in verse 14 to his instruction to Noah about the specifics of how you're going to be obedient to me. The construction of the ark was to be very specific. A specific wood, a specific size. They were to do the things that God had said in the way that God said do it. Make a roof, finish it, cube it above, set the door, make it lower, second, and third decks. And verse 17, for, and this is when we finally discover what he means by with the earth, for I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall die. That's the end of verse 17. So I'm going to destroy them with the earth. Then he says specifically, you build this vessel that will float. You don't have to steer it. You don't need a motor. You don't need a rudder. All it needs to do is float. That's all we're concerned about. So we're going to make these dimensions so that it's going to be the perfect floating vessel. You pitch it inside and out. You put one window in it, you put one door in it, 3 stories, all those specifics. And then he says, because I am going to destroy everything that has breath with a flood. That's pretty drastic. But the situation of the world, the situation of mankind, required a very drastic act. Just did. Cruel, inhumane, you can say what you want to, but it was what had to be done in order for the earth to be cleansed and to start afresh. If I had the ability to take upon myself the mind of God and explain to you all the specifics of how that was right and how that was good and all of that, that'd be great. But I don't. All I can say is God knows, God is sovereign, and God knew what had to be done to cleanse the earth of the sin that had so permeated everything. I've told you the story, but I bought a little Corolla. It's a 2010, 100,000 miles on it. I bought this thing, I don't know, about 3 years ago. And immediately the mice got in it and died in it. And it stunk like crazy. I couldn't get the smell out. There's no way I could get the smell out of it. And I tried, the pop top thing and closed the windows, and all it did was make my windows where I couldn't see out of them when I got back in. It smelled like dead rat, and you'd sprayed some perfume on it. Okay, so I couldn't drive the thing, and so I got it all cleaned up where I could drive it okay. And then it happened again. We drove it to the rental car place. It sat there a week, and whatever Mama had in there died. And so when I got back in it to drive it home from the rental car place after a week, it was like, I think I'll be sick. I don't think I can get it home. So it sat there in my yard, just sat there forever and ever. So finally, I took it to the auto parts place, and I said, find it, fix it, do whatever you got to do. So they took it all apart. I had 2 dead ground squirrels against the cabin filter on the inside, right on the outside of my dashboard. They were dead, and I could tell. Okay? Oh, we can take care of that. We got some of this industrial strength stuff. We'll put some of that in there. So $115 later, it's still in there. The stench of sin had to be removed. Oh, by the way, I'm driving it today. I mean, it's better. Andy let me borrow this ionizer thing. I think that's going to work good, okay? The stench gets in the fabric. You see what I'm saying? And God looked down and He saw that sin had corrupted. Sin doesn't just corrupt the human heart. It corrupts society and way of thinking, and the heart affects the decisions that are made, and the government and everything. And God said, there's only one thing I can do, and that's start over. We just got to start over. Because sin is in the very fabric of society. And it just won't, I can't just fix it. You can't just maneuver a few things around. We've got to start afresh. He started with Noah, a man who was righteous, blameless, and found favor in the eyes of the Lord. All right, observations. We're ready to kind of change gears and move to another little thought, but any observations that may have come to you? Yes, Chuck.
I don't think there's anybody in here named Noah. But there's a lot of Noahs in this whole world.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that's keeping it here. And it's going to get to the point someday they ain't going to be enough Noahs.
Mm-hmm.
And He's going to give up.
I think that'll be the time when His Son will return and take His bride then. Yes. Chuck's observation, I don't know if you heard it, but he said right now there's a lot of Noahs that aren't named Noah in this world that are keeping it going. And sadly, one day we'll probably reach that point where there are just not many of those Noahs left.
Right here, where God took it on himself to take care of this problem.
Mm-hmm.
Now from here on, he's used people to take care of Assyria, Nebuchadnezzar, Titus, all of them. He uses men as his servants.
Mm-hmm.
But right here, he took it on himself.
That's interesting, isn't it? That he takes this bigger responsibility on himself. Good observation, Tommy. And he could have wiped his nation out with his disgust for their rebellion, the northern tribes, southern tribes. He could have done that in a lot of different ways, but as Tommy observes, he did it with heathen nations. Anything else? I picture, and maybe this comes from an old movie I think I saw, where the door closes and the water's rising and people are clamoring trying to get on the ark. I don't have any biblical thought that that's the picture, but yes, if I'm on the ark, I think there's a lot of emotion, a lot of mixed emotion that Noah and his family had, hearing possibly the screams and understanding all those people. Sure. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes. He had probably a bunch of people out there that were close to him, but he tried to convince them. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't listen. Yeah. Great observation. I think sometimes these kind of stories become a little bit antiseptic because we learn them from little children, and we forget that these are real people and they have real emotions. And I don't know, as Randy points out, do you have brothers and sisters? Were there others that were close to him? That, I mean, yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know where I got that picture in my mind. I don't know if it was a movie, but I can just see the waters rising and people screaming and crying and trying to clamor and get on the ark. And if they heard that, can you imagine the quietness after it was over? After everybody had died to see them? Yeah. Yeah, for that period of time that they're floating and the earth is covered with water, there is no, of course they were busy. They were super busy. But it would have been, if you walked out onto the deck of that ark and looked out, it's going to be.
But when you look at it, Noah been preaching to them 120 years, building a boat, and which I've seen what you talked about. But do you think that people actually ever believe? I think they just saw this coming and water rising, and they didn't try to get on. They thought, well, it's going to quit or something like that. So it was something new to them.
Right. I think until it got to a point where they realized, I don't know where that was, but for me it's about right here. I'm going to realize, hey, I can stand in this water. By the way, it's moving, I suspect, pretty swiftly because it comes up from the deep as well. It's not just a rain, but it comes up from the deep, and I'm imagining that they're swirling and it's a lot of action going on. So maybe not even being able to stand here, but as soon as you realize your life's in danger, I think you're going to start clamoring for anything you can get, whether it's an ark or a tree or whatever you can find. But he was right. It is going to rain. Yeah, yeah. That crazy Noah.
God in his perfection uses the word ark. He also used it one other time before this, when Moses was found and brought his people out.
that basket that he was born in or that he was put in, we call an ark.
Mm-hmm.
So God used that ark to his people, and he's using the ark here for his people.
Exactly. Good point. The two times that ark is significant in the history of the nation of Israel would be here, and then when Moses is put in that basket, which was also an ark as well. Yes, yes.
God's mercy seat.
Yes. God's mercy seat. Yes. So in chapter 6, I think our time's up. Sounds like the little kids are in there. But in chapter 6:22, chapter 7, verse 5, you have the complete obedience of Noah. And that's what we started out with, if you remember. The thing that would prove whether Noah was a man of faith or not, does he obey? Did he do the right thing? Did he do what God said? It's proven by the way that he did exactly what God said to the letter. It demonstrated the fact that he was a man of faith. Therefore, he's included in Hebrews chapter 11. I appreciate your comments.